In this lesson, we're going to be talking about naming polynomials, and then we'll take those polynomials and we will start adding and subtracting them together. Let's first go ahead and start talking about how to give a polynomial a name. A polynomial is basically an expression. You have many different types of polynomials, and you can see I have three very specific examples here in blue. One is called a monomial, another is called a binomial, and another is called a trinomial. And you can see by those prefixes, mono, bi, and tri, that it really just indicates how many terms are in the expression. So monomial being one term, binomial being two terms, and then trinomial being three terms. Now, you can also have a polynomial that has four terms, and we would just simply call that a polynomial. But not to be confusing, but all three of these that you see here in blue, they are also polynomials. They just have very specific names that are listed here. Okay, now that we know a little bit about what a polynomial is, that's how we would name a polynomial, by the number of terms. So if something were to ask you, what is the polynomial's name by the number of terms? If you had something with one term, it would be a monomial. And if you had something with two terms, binomial, three terms, trinomial. Then we're going to put that together with naming a polynomial by degree, because once we know both of these, we're going to kind of smush them together. So here's just an idea of how do you name a polynomial by its degree. So we've talked about several of these already, or you may even be familiar with them, but let's take a look here. A polynomial with a degree of 0 is, we like to call it a constant, and we know what a constant is. A constant is just a number, like 5. This polynomial has a degree of 0. Looking at the next one, you can see a polynomial with degree 1, we call that a linear polynomial. And we call it linear because it would give us an example, or an example would be 5x. And we know that, for example, y equals mx plus b, that the x has a degree of 1. That's what we call it. That's a degree of the exponent. And you'll kind of see the pattern as we move forward here. But a polynomial of degree 2, we're going to call this a quadratic, because it's going to have that degree of 2, or that exponent of 2. An example would just be 5x squared. A polynomial of degree 3 would be something called a cubic. And an example of that would be 5x cubed, because that degree is 3. And then moving forward, such as the degree of 4, we don't have a special name. We just call it 4th degree. An example would be 5x to the 4th. And we would continue that pattern on. For example, a polynomial of degree 5 would just be called a 5th degree polynomial. And you can move forward. So those are the degrees of a polynomial. And we're going to kind of expand on this topic in a second. All right, let's take a look at this chart here. Let's first determine what the degree of a monomial is, okay? And the way you're going to do it is you're going to take the sum of the exponents of all the variables. So in this in this first one, you can see that the degree is going to be 2. And the reason it's going to be 2 is we have taken the exponents and we've added them together. And in this example, there's only one exponent, so that's the degree of the item. The name of this is going to be a quadratic monomial. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. Quadratic monomial, because we have a highest degree here of 2 and it's one term. So it's a quadratic monomial. Let's look at the second example. So we have x, y, z. Now, when you don't have an exponent, you technically have a 1 on top of each one of those. So the degree of this would be 3. So this would be a cubic monomial. In the third one, you can see that we have a couple of exponents. We have a 3, we have an 8, and a 1. Don't forget to put a little 1 there. And if we were to add the exponents, that would give us 12. So this would be a 12th degree. I usually like to write that word out. And that would be a monomial. This would be a 12th degree monomial. Notice how I didn't include the coefficient because we're only looking at the exponents within the term. Okay, the last one is a constant, and we know that constants have a degree of 0. Okay, so you could just write 0 degree monomial. Another way that we can write this, which is actually more common, is this. Constant monomial. You're more likely to see constant monomial versus 0 degree monomial. Okay, that's how you find the degree of a monomial. Now let's go ahead and move forward and talk about how do you find the degree of a polynomial. So you've got to be really careful here not to confuse these two rules. A degree of a monomial is found by finding the highest degree of any monomial within the polynomial. So really what I want to do here is break this first one up into each of its terms. So here we have a term, and here we have a term. And we want to ask ourselves, what is the degree of that first term? And we know that this degree is 3. The degree of the second one is a 2. The highest degree of either of those two is 3, making this a third degree, or 3 degrees. Now, to give it its full name, you want to take its highest degree, and you want to say, okay, well, it's a third degree, which means it's cubic. And we also see that we have 2 terms here. So this is going to be a cubic binomial. All right, let's take a look at the second one. This one has 3 terms. In my first term, my degree is 2. In my second term, my degree is 1. And in my third term, my degree is 0. So the highest degree here is 2. So a second degree polynomial is called a quadratic. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. This is a quadratic. And then the name that we give it for the number of terms there is trinomial. So this is a quadratic trinomial. Let's look at another one. This one has 2 terms. So I'm going to go ahead and circle those terms. You don't have to circle the terms, but I'm just going to for the purposes of the example. And you can see that the first monomial has a degree of 6. And the second monomial has a degree of 9. So that gives this a degree of 9. So we're just going to call this a 9th degree. And because it's 2 terms, this is going to be a 9th degree binomial. Last one here, you can see it breaks into 4 terms. My first term is a degree 8. My second is a degree 5, 3, and 1. So the highest is 8. So this would be an 8th degree. Now, notice how I have 4 terms. So it can't be a monomial, binomial, or trinomial. This is just going to be an 8th degree polynomial. And there you have it. Okay, let's bump it up a little bit. Now, we're going to take that understanding and we're going to talk about how to add and subtract polynomials, put them into something called standard form, and then give it a name. So here's how we add polynomials. It's basically just combining like terms. You just have to do a little bit of extra thinking. So in this first one, we have a binomial being added to a binomial. So what you want to do is locate the terms that are the same in each of the quantities. So you can see here, I have 2n squared and I have 7n squared. The operation at the center is addition. So I just want to go ahead and add those two together. So that's going to give me 9n squared. Now, remember, when we're adding, your exponents are just going to stay the same. Common misconception is that you add the exponents. That's only when you're multiplying. And then the other piece here, I have positive 2n plus negative 3n. So that's really saying 2 plus negative 3 is going to leave us with negative n. Now, the question here becomes to put this into standard form. And this one is actually already in standard form. Standard form of a polynomial is whenever you line up the degrees of each monomial in descending order. So largest to smallest. So you can see here that my polynomial is already in order. So I have a 2 and then I have a degree 1. So this is already in standard form. And we're going to give this a name. This one is going to be a quadratic binomial. Let's try the next one. This time I'm taking a trinomial and I'm subtracting a trinomial. So it's starting to get a little bit more complex. So start wherever you would like. I'm just going to go ahead and start with the first term here, 4x. And I'm going to subtract negative 8x. And this is probably the most confusing part of adding and subtracting because there is that double negative there. 4x minus negative 8x is actually adding 8x. That's going to leave us with 12x. Moving on to, let's go ahead and move on to positive 8x squared. I can combine that with 5x squared. So it's going to be 8 minus 5 is going to give us positive 3x squared. And then I'm going to go ahead and finish with negative 7x cubed and negative 8x cubed. But again, I'm going to subtract them. So that really turns into addition. So that's going to give us positive x cubed. Now, there's your polynomial. Now we're going to put it in standard form. Notice how each of my terms here has a degree. The degree of the first one is a 1. The degree of the second term is a 2. And this is a 3. I want to put this in descending order. So I want to put it from the largest to the smallest. So I'm just going to rewrite it as x squared plus x cubed plus 3x squared plus 12x. And this is standard form of the polynomial. And we're going to call this a cubic trinomial. The largest degree is 3, and there are 3 terms. So therefore, cubic trinomial. Let's do one more. This time, we're doing a lot of adding and subtracting here. So we've got a binomial, we've got a trinomial, we have another binomial. So let's just pick a term to start with. Let's go ahead and start with m cubed. I'm going to take m cubed and I'm going to add it to 6m cubed. So m cubed plus 6m cubed is going to give me 7m cubed. And I can see that I don't have anything to add to it or subtract from it in the third piece. So I'm just going to go ahead and write it as 7m cubed. If you want to, you can even check them off as you finish them. All right, let's go ahead and do the next one. Positive m to the 4th. I'm going to go ahead and see that there's no other term that is a 4th degree in any of the others. So I'm just going to go ahead and add him here, m to the 4th. He's done. Now go ahead and try the other terms. I'm going to go ahead and I'll just start with the next one in line. Negative 2m. And it looks like I have positive 3m over here. So negative 3m minus 3, negative 2m minus 3m is going to leave me with negative 5m. So those two terms are done. And then of course I have the last two. negative 5m squared minus 2m squared, leaving me with negative 7m squared. Okay, now that everything is all added and subtracted, let's go ahead and put it in standard form. So you can see that the degree of this monomial is 3. This one is 4. This one is 1. And this one is 2. So basically, I just need to order those in order from largest to smallest. So I'm going to rewrite it as 4 to the m plus 7m cubed minus 7m squared minus 5m. And this will be called a 4th degree polynomial. Now, you may be wondering, could I, from the beginning, could I have taken each of these polynomials and kind of put them, each one of those, in standard form before I added and subtracted them? Absolutely. And I would highly recommend that, because then it'll naturally put your answer into standard form, so you don't have to do that as a second step. But it's not, you don't have to, but it is definitely a helpful step for you. All right, that brings us to the end of our lesson on naming and adding and subtracting polynomials.